welcome. Thank you for taking the time to join us here today for our law school admissions power hour. My name is Ayaka. Alyssa here is with me today. We are both so excited to have you guys here. So just to give a little bit of background about us, as I said, my name is Ayaka, and I have been in Steve's courses for now about 8 months. But before that, I was watching a lot of his YouTube videos, and I started messaging him, and I was like, "Hey, I need more help on the LSAT." And as I was getting more help with the LSAT, I met Alyssa, the wonderful Alyssa here, and we really hit it off, and we were in a study group together. And then beyond that, we started talking about our personal statements, essays and applications and all things applications. And we were like, this is awesome. We love it. We love the process. We love learning about it. So this is why we're here. We want to share our knowledge. We want to share what we've learned in this journey. And as of right now, we are TAs with Steve in his LSAT course, and we've done a lot of work there, and we are also consultants here for LSAT Unplugged. Alyssa, I will give you some time to introduce yourself.
Excuse me if you can hear like a motorcycle outside. I'll just do my best to work over the audio, but Ayaka pretty much covered it. I've also been in the course for about 8 months now. Before I was in the LSAT Unplugged course, I was a complete independent studier. I got a lot of books off of Amazon, to be completely tell the truth. This is not an Amazon plug, but I was studying for the LSAT completely alone, and I was doing fine. I didn't feel like I needed a group. I didn't feel like I could afford a group, and I just felt like if I could just, leverage some free resources, I'd be just dandy. And I do believe that that's the case for everyone. After being in the course for 8 months, meeting Ayaka and creating a study group with her, I basically found out that my application would have been fine, most likely, if I were on the journey alone, but it was better and much stronger when I actually started to leverage group sessions like this. I actually joined the course from a free session like this, and Ayaka and I hold these sessions now because, well, first of all, I'm a low income woman of color. I'm Hispanic and I'm queer. And I just feel that inclusivity is one of the most important parts of the law school admissions process. So that's when Ayaka and I reached out to Steve and asked if we could basically pass along all of the information that we were getting from the course. And even saying this out loud, it just sounds crazy. Like we are we are paying to be part of this course. We have full access. I don't know if anyone's gotten a chance to catch it. Just last week, I personally interviewed the director of admissions for University of Maryland Carey School of Law. I have another personal interview coming up with the dean of admissions for UCLA, where it's just me and them talking. And a year ago, I was not in those rooms or in those spaces where I was straight up talking to these people myself, and I could ask personalized questions. And I want everyone in this Zoom room to get access to that. If you have questions for directors of admissions, if you have questions of conversations that I've had from deans of admissions, I want everyone to ask that here. So with that being said, Ayaka and I are basically just going to go over maybe like common pitfalls, mistakes, some things that we've come across. We have both personally become obsessed with how to make an application go from good to great. And one of the reasons that has come up for us so much is, I don't know if it's new, how many of you are following law school admissions news, but this year, for the 2021 cycle of admissions, it is across the country we are seeing one of the highest rises. There are more applications for the fall cycle of 2021 than law schools usually generally see. The 2008 economic crash spurred a jump in law school admissions. It may have maybe plateaued or it reached a regular sense. And this year, most likely, of course, nobody could say an actual true cause. As we all know, we're all about to use a JD degree. So we'd all have to say, well, it depends on what the reasoning for that is. but most likely it's because of a stay-at-home order. People have more time to study for the LSAT. They have more time to maybe make a life change. Life changes are happening. So I know myself, speaking with Director of Admissions Jonathan Glick of University of Maryland Carey School of Law, on a normal year, he sees around 1,000 applications per cycle. And if you think about how many days there are in the year, that's a lot of personal statement essays he's reading in one day. 1,000 essays per cycle is normal, but across the whole and across the United States of America, I can say for sure, we're seeing a rise in that. So that's why Ayaka and I kind of want to talk about, how do you make an essay better? What about nitty gritty details, outlines, and things like that? So we are just going to get started, but we're going to get started, but I absolutely invite anyone and everyone, please type in the chat, please unmute yourself and jump in. There's a raise hand function. We're watching everything and we're here. We were talking about it earlier, and we wanted to make sure that everyone knew that this is really your room. We're here for you. So we can talk for an hour. We do it all the time, but this is really a chance for you to like leverage any personal questions that you might have. So that being said, Ayaka, I'm just going to straight up ask you a question, and we'll see if any questions naturally filter in here. What would you say is the number one most common mistake when it comes to law school applications?
Sure. For me, I think it's people who try to rush through the application process. The application it takes a lot of time, considering the LSAT, considering, you have to write a personal statement that may take a couple weeks to, a couple months to write. And some have diversity statements, some have addendums, some have character and fitness statements that people need to write. There are extra essays out there that schools ask for. So considering all of that, I don't think this is an application that you can get done in 3 weeks. This is really an application that is asking you to look into yourself and reflect on yourself, and also show law schools that you're ready for law school. So I think you don't really want to rush through the application process. Don't think you can do it in 3 weeks. If you're a superstar, you might be able to, but
can I ask you, when you say don't rush, what part of the application, when I hear that, I'm sort of trying to imagine, okay, what part of the application is supposed to take a long amount of time? I mean, studying for the LSAT, I know that Steve has 6 months plans, he has 2-month plans, 1-month plans, and that length can take a different amount of time. Are my essays supposed to take the same amount of time?
I think that essays, and I said this in a previous session that is on the Facebook page, in how to find a topic to write about. But if you are in the habit of already writing, you don't have that ramp up period to be in the mode to write. However, most of us are not in the creative writing space, the space about writing about yourself and reflecting about yourself. So it takes a little bit of time to get there. And I do find that with consistent writing, how you start your first draft is very different. So I think that ramp up period takes, depending on how often you're writing, takes about a week to even 3 weeks just to ramp up writing. Your personal statement could take, a month if you're really diligent about making quick changes, having someone read them, making quick changes, and then review. So, however, I do find, even for my process, it takes about 6 months to really do a first draft, edit it thoughtfully, and then ask, my editing group to take a look, get feedback, think about that thoughtfully, and then edit again, and do that a couple times. I said it on a recent class in the LSAT Unplugged. I end up with about 25 to 30 drafts of an essay by the end of the time, by the time I'm submitting. So that can really take 6 months. The LSAT studying, I thought I would be done in 6 months. That turned into 12 to 14 months. So
right.
Really, I think it takes a long time. Alyssa, same question to you. How has your law school application journey been? Have you seen that timeline extend? How are we feeling there?
I think, okay, so I think it's interesting what we're bringing up about like a personal statement essay versus a diversity statement essay. And a lot of schools are completely different. They have different prompts. And that's something that we can absolutely talk about if anybody has questions on that. And in terms of what we're even talking about, what the difference is between a personal statement and diversity statement. I'm not sure what the temperature of who we have in the room. I don't know if we have like seasoned veterans that have maybe like 3 drafts of an essay done, or if you're just getting started. So please type in the chat and I'd love to tailor the conversation to you. So I have one question on what's the difference between a personal statement and a diversity statement. Ayaka and I say this a little bit differently. So please feel free to just listen to either one of us on it. I like to say that a personal statement and what I've heard, okay, we have a lot of people that are just getting started and studying for the LSAT. So when it comes to thinking about essays, just to round out the conversation I just started with Ayaka, I know that I started studying for the LSAT, and with everything else going in my life, and maybe this mimics a lot of other people or mirrors their own experience, I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to study for the LSAT and I'm going to take it in maybe a 6 to 8 month period. But things happen. Maybe I move apartments, or something else happens, or there's a sickness that happens, which happens with everyone. And something that I've really learned about studying for the LSAT is that it does take my full attention when I do sit down to it in order for me to feel like I'm doing my best. And therefore the time lags on. And I am also an LSAT tutor, and I would be lying or if I said that I've never had a student actually succeed in the timeline that they first set out for themselves. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying that LSAT admissions, LSAT testing, and writing an essay tends to open up more possibilities. The more I learned about the LSAT, the more I became capable of getting deeper into it. And so there creates a different kind of timeline with that. We do have a question in here from Marla. You're welcome to unmute yourself. I'd love to hear.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, quick question. I'm taking the LSAT in August and I just started last month. Instead of segmenting just studying for the LSAT for however many months and then just spending months on writing your essays, would you potentially do a little bit of both at the same time? Like my brain does need breaks from games and things like that. And I think you know where I'm going with this. So would you recommend that?
I love that question. And I know that Ayaka will have things on that too. It definitely depends on who you are as a person. When I first started studying for the LSAT, I was trying to do segmenting my days, where maybe if I had a full day free, I would spend 3 to 4 hours studying for the LSAT. And then I also have I've been a professional tap dancer. It's completely random, but I would like try to film things for tap dancing. And then maybe at the end of that day, I would say, okay, I'm going to do something for another job or like a family affair. And I realized that segmenting my days absolutely did not work for me. And so I started to have to segment out chunks of the week, where it was Monday, I would study. Instead of 4 hours for the LSAT, I would study around my job. But the only thing I did was the LSAT on Mondays. And maybe on, say, for example, a Saturday, the only thing I touched was a personal statement essay. So I'm sort of alluding to the point of exactly what you're mentioning in terms of like of breaks. And it gets tricky when we start to think about what does one person balance and how much time you have to try to achieve that. And I assume that you're taking the LSAT in August and you're applying for 2022 fall, which is a good, I would definitely recommend. I just got advice from a director of admissions to try to take your LSAT 10 to 12 months out before you intend on going to school. And the reason for that being is that, you might need to take the LSAT again. You want to get your application materials in. I'm very loosely saying this, but a very loose, good rule of thumb is that if you're trying to get early decision, or if you want your application in at a good time before the new year, is a very rough, loosey-goosey, quote unquote, like good time to do it. When it comes to your essays, I'm sure you'll see this over the course of the next few months. You will most likely want to create like humps of time. So maybe you ramp up your studying for the LSAT, and when you get burned out in the LSAT, you go back and you sit and you look at your draft, and maybe you ramp up on the LSAT, and then maybe you go back and look at your draft. So definitely, you already know where I'm going. Is you can't do it at the same time. But as Ayaka and I both noticed with each other, a really good draft can become a lot better when you start it earlier and you give it the room to breathe. Ayaka, what do you think about that?
I love that answer, and I agree 100%. I remember a couple months ago, Alyssa, you were running a class in the LSAT Unplugged courses, and you said, the days where you need a break from LSAT studying, which I agree takes your whole attention. And I work full time, and I'm like, the LSAT studying is the first thing I do in the morning, so it has my like 100% brain power, and then I go into work, so it's a little bit so I'm not tired when I'm studying, but there are days where I'm just like, I can't do it. I'm just like way too exhausted. And I remember Alyssa saying, well, you don't have to do the LSAT, you can do law school application, it's LSAT adjacent. And I think that's a great way where you're not taking yourself out of the mentality of applying to law school, but you are still in that space, and you're not, you don't have to think about the LSAT during that day, but you're just still doing something that moves you forward in that application process.
I think something also that is, and Marla, please jump in too if you want to jump in, but something that I noticed about my essays, and I keep saying personal statement, and I still haven't talked about the difference between that and a diversity statement. And I know that, for example, there are some schools that have programmatic contribution essays, which, take a look at a clinic and what do I imagine I could contribute to that, or how would I like to fit into that clinic. So the essays, really, we're talking very broadly. Schools have much different, some schools have a why do you want to go to this school essay. And please note, nobody let me forget, I actually want to talk about how much do you talk about why do you want to go to that school, because that prompt can be really tricky. But in terms of length of time to give yourself room to breathe, Ayaka and I have seen over 100 essays, and I started saying that a month ago, so I'm sure it's even more now. And one of the most common things that we see is that someone spends all their time studying for the LSAT, and then they want to get their applications in, and they write draft. They're like, this is great, I've been thinking about it for a while. And they ask us, is it done? Is my essay done? And a really good essay is able to speak about big ideas and big events or big feelings and emotions. And if you think about a personal statement essay, I am nearly 30 years old. I have 3 decades worth of a life to tell. And if I were to tell it really well and kind of bring you the best representation of myself in a 1.5 to 2 pages, that actually requires more thought than we are seeing a lot of people giving it. They might think, oh, I have this event in my life, I'm a pretty good writer, but it could be better. And again, I just want to remind everyone that applications are up, which is a good thing because we need people with JDs in the country, but you absolutely need to give yourself some time and space to do so. Okay, so I'm going to move on from Marla, and please jump into if you have anything at all to say or ideas at all. I know that you said you're taking a test in August. We're happy to talk about the LSAT. We really can talk about a lot of different topics. So somebody did ask, what's the difference between a personal statement and a diversity statement? I like to say that a personal statement is similar to an interview. So when you first sit down with somebody who wants to get to know you, and imagine that this person in admissions says, tell me about yourself. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to list off your resume or maybe jobs that you've done, because they can see that on your resume. You want to breathe life into yourself. You will want to talk about what you're passionate about, maybe tell a story. That's actually one of the most common pieces of feedback I've gotten from admissions officers is have a story about yourself in your back pocket. I don't want to say at all times, because that sounds like you have to be on alert all the time, but you generally should have some sort of story that speaks to who you are as a person. Ayaka, I'm totally going to put you on blast here because I love your story. And I love Ayaka's story, that if somebody asked me about her, I would say Ayaka was working as a translator for a cybersecurity company and was very invested in her work. And when she was working as a translator, she would do all this research about cybersecurity, and she knew so much about cybersecurity. And the conversation would take a turn into creating a future for the company and legal avenues. And Ayaka's wrote this beautiful essay about, well, okay, I need more information. I need that JD because I found a gap in my own life and I want to close that gap in. Her essay did it much more better than I just did. But everyone can see, I hope, in that example, how she's not just telling us about what she's doing at her job. She's telling us something that came up, and it's a really compelling story. And in the story, she talks about how she closes her own gaps, your curiosity, you follow that. And what I get out of that when I read it is I was like, oh, Ayaka, you're a person who doesn't just stop when you don't know something. You obviously like to learn. Somebody's asking if yes, there will be a recording of this. It will most likely be on the YouTube channel. It will be posted on Facebook, Instagram, all the different channels. So in that sense, I'm talking about personal statement. Personal statement, tell me about yourself. The best way to do so generally is tell a story. A diversity statement is different than a personal statement because the admissions officers are wondering, what experiences do you have, or have you been in situations? Do you come from a certain background? Is there something in your life that would allow you to bring a different perspective when everybody's sitting in that classroom having a discourse, having a conversation? A lot of times the diversity statement can be thought of as a cultural background, maybe a sexual orientation background. It can be an age difference. You could be very significantly young applying to law school and saying, I'm not saying you should do this, but saying I'm really young, I could bring new perspective. It could be you're a much older applicant, and that could be your diversity lens. But it's any experience that you've had in your life that might be able to offer some sort of more interesting, unique discourse when they're imagining you in that classroom, that you might be able to offer something that could be exciting. What do you think, Ayaka?
Yeah, I think you put it beautifully. I know you and we express what the difference is a little bit differently. For me, the personal statement is very much an internal looking, who are you as a person? What do you want admissions to know about you? And it comes in the form of a story, but the story isn't the key thing that you want admissions to know. Out of the beautiful summary that Alyssa gave of my essay, right? Out of there, I really want admissions to know that I'm driven, I'm curious, I have empathy for these companies who are dealing with these legal problems that are, the law can't really catch up and the technology keeps getting better and better. Like understand, like, and in studying and understanding all of that, like being able to put all that knowledge together and speak in a different language. That's what I want admissions to know, not necessarily the details of the story. So really the personal statement, I like to say, is a very internal story or internal, reflection of who you are. Diversity statement for me is much more of an external, exactly what Alyssa said of, what experiences color your lenses, right? Like what, and that could be race, age, sexual orientation, all of that. But that can also be a significant experience in your life. Doesn't have to be traumatic. It could be a very, very positive experience that you've had. You might be in a very niche industry that not a lot of people understand, and that's a diversity statement as well. So I think, and Alyssa, I believe you agree with me, is that every single person can write a diversity statement. It doesn't have to be about race, religion, sex, it doesn't have to be that. So that's why I say external facing.
And I would say that it doesn't stop at that. one of the most common pitfalls that Ayaka and I have been seeing is maybe a diversity statement. For example, I am Hispanic, and if I wrote an essay just saying that I was Hispanic, that actually doesn't paint me as a thoughtful person, because I haven't shared with the reader what that does for me or what that's like for me and how that has made me maybe a good candidate to have a conversation with. So I'm putting my laundry out there for everyone to know that I did end up writing a diversity statement about being queer and Hispanic and the intersectionality of that. But what I really mostly spoke about is that being Hispanic, I have so many cousins. I can't keep track, but I'm number 19 of the cousins down the line. And so I don't know how many there are of us, but I know that I'm number 19. And I was raised with a mindset of putting the family, being conscious of a family, being conscious of a group dynamic. And that showed up later in my life when in queer relationships, maybe if that person wasn't out to their family, I understood the gravity of working together as a team dynamic and how relationships and interpersonal relationships affect us all. And so those experiences for me have made me a compassionate, patient person who I can have explicit conversations, but still in a compassionate manner. So I take it a step farther and say what that's done for me and how that makes me the person that I am today. If that helps anyone, it can't stop at something that you're saying is making you diverse. It does need to share why you'd be a great fit to have conversation with. Kind of.
Awesome. In the same vein, there's a question in the chat from Ushali. I'm sorry if I messed up your name. Says, would we recommend having different personal statements for different universities? And I can't. First off, I think you should stick with one personal statement for your applications. I think there's a couple caveats to that. The first is if you're writing university specific personal statements. So let's say like in your last paragraph, you say like, hey, I love this program at university X, Y, and Z, and therefore I want to go to this university. That is somewhat university specific. So you are going to have to change that paragraph for every single school that you apply to. Please be very careful about not sending the wrong essay to the wrong school. That happens every year and it's unfortunate. The other caveat to that is if there is a school, and I like to bring Howard University up as like the star example of there is a history to that school, a beautiful history, and there is a student body that is so supportive of that history and so in line with their beliefs and all of that. And so that school, the application to that school lends itself to a certain type of essay or certain type of person. And so I think it's okay to tailor your essay towards some like a school that is very specific in its vision. But beyond that, I think doing multiple personal statements to the degree that you need to get it to for it to be really, really great, awesome. It's such a journey that you're going to burn yourself out trying to write 4, 5, 6 different, like totally different personal statements. Alyssa, I would love to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, basically in short, we don't recommend writing different personal statements for different schools pretty much ever. Even when a school does ask for like to get a really great, fantastic personal statement tells your story and who you are. So everyone listening, I have been searching so hard for the answer in terms of how much do I talk about the school. I know that it's something that everyone has heard. When you submit an essay, talk about the school. Why do you want to go there? Do you want to be a part of this class or do you like this clinic? Like go on the website, do some research and kind of like soften them up a little bit, unless the school explicitly says, why do you want to go to this school? I would almost recommend against it. It doesn't make you stand out if you, and this is all very finicky because everyone's statement is different, and it depends on your execution. But if you go online and you look up a few courses here and there and you do a little bit of digging and you throw in some sentences in your personal statement, I do not believe that it pushes you to the top of any pile. It doesn't make you look different. It doesn't make you look more interested. What could make you stand out is being a thoughtful, clear, good writer. If you're able to talk about yourself in a compelling way and a very clear way. That being said, there are some prompts that say, why do you want to go to this school? University of Maryland Carey School of Law is one of them. And Director of Admissions, Jonathan Glick, landed the point that even though they ask you why you want to go to that school, please don't take up too much time talking about the school, because it ends up being a missed opportunity to share more about yourself. You could talk about the school and talk about yourself in that program, but make sure that the focus of the personal statement is on you. And if the focus of the personal statement is on you, then if you do need to alter it for different schools, it should only be a little bit of alteration, not entirely different essays, because then that would be school focused instead of personal focused. We had another question from Mike about how do letters of recommendations and personal statements work on LSAC's website. Short answer, if you call LSAC, I like to call them on Wednesdays. This is not scientific, but on Wednesdays, they're always really nice to me. On Mondays, a little busy. On LSAT test weeks, very busy. And some people suggest to call them right off the bat, and they absolutely will walk you through the process. Letters of recommendation is tricky. Ayaka, do you have anything? I have more to say on it, but it can be a long answer or a short answer.
Yeah. With the letters of rec, I know there's people out there who are like, don't contact me until like 3 months before you're turning it in or whatever. I tell people earlier the better in getting the letter of rec in, because people are busy. People, and especially for those people who've been out of college for a while and are getting professional letters of recommendation, which I have a couple in my account as well. We'll get really busy, so give the heads up early. And just Mike, technically speaking, in your LSAT account, you give the information about the recommender, and it'll trigger an email to the recommender, and they will upload their letter into LSAC. So that's an automatic process that gets uploaded into your account. I won't go any further than that, but I say get it in as early as possible, because you never know what could happen.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ayaka. And if I'm not mistaken, I do want to make sure that we at least mention that the person who's writing the letter of recommendation, they are the ones who actually submit it directly to LSAC. So you need to give them the proper instructions, which is, okay, I said I was going to say short answer, but basically you open a portal on LSAC and you send the person that is writing your letter of recommendation a link for them to create their own profile in the portal. And then that person must send it in. And that's all for privacy, making sure integrity is there, you're not getting the letter, judging it. So there are multiple steps, which is, I think, speaks even more prominently to Ayaka's point that the sooner the better. How long how old can your recommendations be? First of all, always check with the person who's writing the letter of recommendation. Make sure that they're okay with you, maybe like using it a little bit later. I don't want to get this wrong. I am not official LSAC, but I believe it's 2 years, 5 years, how many years?
I think it's
Getting
5.
I'm getting my numbers mixed up. It's 2 to 5 years. But LSAC, if you call LSAC, they will absolutely tell you, and they're really nice on Wednesdays.
And Rochelle, just to round out the recommendation letter conversation, told too early if I'm planning to apply in fall 2022. I don't think so. It's been a weird year. So I think, their schools have a lot of grace for things that are, have been in the account a little bit early. That's fine. I think the worst fear is not getting the letter of rec in on time. And I do know a couple people who asked me, they're like, oh, I'm applying and the deadline is May 1st. Is it too early to get a letter of recommendation? I'm like, you are too late. Like, get it in. Call them now. So
give it some time and space. And in the last question about letter of rec that actually you did ask, Rochelle, is do you need to have an application open for a specific school? And my understanding is no, you do not. It's all, I'm not being clear, but basically, no, you do not. If somebody does want to write to specific schools, that's possible. But you always want to ask your writers of the letters of recommendation, if they do want to address specific schools, they need to make sure that they send it to the correct portal. I imagine like little tubes, I do everything visually, so they need to send it to the correct portal, but always ask them, I learned this tip, for an all-encompassing general, in case at the last minute you decide to apply to a safety school or a different region, or just maybe if you're like, oh, I see the school and it's fantastic, you have a generalized letter that then you can, that can also be sent in for, and it says for all schools. I hope that was clear.
Awesome. All right. Not to backtrack a little bit, but Kylie, we do have a question from Kylie about how to include the why a particular school, or how to write a compelling statement about that. And I think, number one, if your school that you're applying to has a different essay for the why that particular school, like a separate small essay, let's say, put it in that. Don't waste your time in the personal statement to put that in. Just separate it out. If it doesn't, and if the school isn't specific about you putting that in the personal statement, you could take it or leave it. Oftentimes a personal statement sounds better without it. But if you're like, yes, I want to put the reason, and maybe it's your dream school, so that's why you want to put it in. I know Elena, who is another TA in the LSAT Unplugged courses, she did that for UC Davis, particularly because that was her dream school. And Alyssa and I, we've come across a lot of these, and there's common things like people who swallowed a brochure about the school and it's just regurgitating facts about it, which is not the greatest, especially because the admissions officers are employed at that school. They know how great they are. They know their facts about the school. You don't need to tell them. They also know the professors. So name dropping a professor without any context is not great either. What you want to show is you've done research, you're interested, talk about a particular program, or even Alyssa, and this is my favorite thing from Alyssa is talk about a paper that the professor that you're interested in, wrote recently, because these professors, they're publishing papers all the time, and you want to make sure that, you're up to date with the papers that are being published, the, law reviews and all of that. So kind of do the research, do a deep dive, and see how your essay can connect to the school, because I guarantee there is some sort of connection there.
And something I think is really interesting, who reads the essays? There's a group, there's an entire team of admissions officers. They all work together. Multiple people read your essays. They read them at different times. So it's going to be a large group of people. And nope, I can't tell you who it is, like a certain person that you can email. I can't tell you if it's the director or the dean. It's just there's a group of people, there's a team of people, they all read them. Something to go off of Ayaka's mention though, in terms of how do you talk about why do you want to go to school and not make it look like you just went on the website and saw like, oh cool, you have this one class, I'd like to take that class, or you guys, there are some pretty surface level things. When I was first getting started in my application journey, I was confused on how to get past surface level in terms of research. One of the easiest ways to do that is to email admissions. So for example, if you're interested in working misdemeanor cases in Baltimore and you want to help provide asylum for real people and you want to be in those cases, you could email the admissions officers at University of Maryland Carey School of Law and say, I'm really interested in working asylum cases for people who have been prosecuted of misdemeanors, and all these different sorts of activities and clinics. Ask them about the clinics. That's what they're there for. So you could look on their website, see something that they offer, take it a step farther and email admissions, be kind, be polite, be short and sweet, and say, how can you tell me more about how much your school has to offer on immigration law? And they may or may not, get back to you. And then you would understand more about the program and you could speak more about the program. We have a few more questions. We have a question up from Nazreen about how personal is too personal. I'll see if I can answer this short and sweet. If you aren't comfortable talking about it in a professional setting interview, please don't write about it in an essay. If somebody were to bring it up and you feel emotional or you feel too emotional to really speak on it, don't bring it up. If you wouldn't talk about it in a job interview, probably don't bring it up. But if something is fully processed trauma or fully processed, maybe an event that feels like a very personal event, and you can speak about it in a clear, concise, and processed way, and then speak on how that made you stronger, how that brought more of a character building opportunity for you, then you can absolutely talk about it. If it comes to something graphic, please be clear. Don't say something bad happened. Say exactly what happened, but then stop there. Don't be too graphic. If it feels too personal to talk about, don't talk about it. If you can talk about it in a clear way that talks about your character, please talk about it. Don't be too graphic. But they really do want to get to know you. So if you feel that that's the best way to tell a story that encompasses who you are as a person, then do it. Only if it's the best way to do so. Does that answer this question?
Sorry, I just wanted to add on, a lot of times we are talking about very personal stories, right? And our lived experiences. Oftentimes people dwell a little bit too much on what happened and not what came out of it. So if you have a draft of your essay in front of you, take a look. How much time, how much space do you take up writing about what happened versus what came out of it? And more times than not, and this has happened with my essay multiple times over, 90% of it is the event itself, and we don't get enough of who you are coming out of that event, right? So even in a very personal essay, you want to get to the how you came out of it quicker than talking about the event itself.
Ayaka and I were speaking this morning about people who have gone through something very serious or something intense, or maybe they were experiencing a day-to-day experience at their job. And they try to create a style in their essay of repetition and putting that labor onto the reader. And more times than not, it depends on execution, but it doesn't work. If you're trying to take your labor and your suffering and you're trying too hard to force it upon the reader, it's not as effective as just saying this happened and talking about what you did after, what you learned about that after. There's another question in the chat that talks about how much are your essays related? How much can they be not related to each other? I always think about a fashion, like a Ayaka, do you know what I'm saying? A fashion collection, how like they're different pieces, or maybe they use the same color waves, but they're different pieces of what a person can wear. But I'll let you finish out my thought.
Yeah, no, I get that. I remember I used to call it like a pie. Like if you are a pie, the LSAT score is one piece of it, right? Your GPA is another piece. Your personal statement is another piece. Your diversity statement, another piece. Your resume, another one. So you want to, at the end of your essay, give the picture of the whole pie as possible. And a lot of times we see personal statements, diversity statements that are talking about like running through their resume again. You've given the same piece as the resume in your personal statement. And so we're missing something there.
So are you saying that they can and should be covering different aspects of your life?
I think so. Every single part of the application really should be showcasing, and don't get too crazy, but like it should be cohesive as you as a person. But for me, like you said, Alyssa, my personal statement is about cybersecurity. I've also been a fitness instructor, and you wouldn't see that on Zoom, but and there's other things out there that I've done in my life that I'm proud of, I'm happy to do, and it's just something that doesn't show up as an LSAT score or as a GPA. So you really want to show different sides of you. The application is really to get a better picture of who you are.
Yes, it breathes different aspects into you that you just can't see with your metrics. And also your personality. Personality is great. They want personality in law school. They want to know if you're, it doesn't, not everything has to be intense. If you have an intense story, that's great, but not everything has to be. I've heard multiple examples of really fantastic essays that were about mundane day-to-day things. Something else that I do want to mention that is it's advice from he has his own YouTube channel. He's an alumni from UC Berkeley Law. He's been a professor. He has a fantastic resume. I'm not doing him justice whatsoever, but he did mention that if you really felt compelled, you could write an entire essay and maybe string like a thought in there, like about one thing, and then take that thread from that essay and elaborate on it in another essay if you wanted to create this like masterpiece of a full application. Or maybe you mention something in an essay and you develop it in another, but very difficult to do, but you could do that. We have more questions, and it's amazing how much we could just really talk about all of this. In case anybody misses us or we don't get to a question, and we also have questions about the addendum, we might go 5 minutes over at least. Is that okay, Anna? Anna, DM me if we can go 5 minutes over the hour, because there's so many questions and I want to get to them all. If you have questions we don't get to, you can email us at admissions@lsatunplugged.com. That's not, Christina, it's funny. That's not a random email. That's Ayaka and I. We have direct lines to Steve. We have direct lines to people in the course. It's really just us two. We're the ones that answer that. So we have a question from Jess. Jess, can I elaborate on what I mean by too graphic? This is a great question. I have seen a few essays, for example, that have to do with racial tension, with outright racism. And there have been Black Americans that have written essays that maybe want to use the N-word because that is what they are experiencing in their daily life. From admissions officers, I've heard that they feel that word is too strong in a professional setting, and there may be a way to get a person's point across without using the graphic language that they themselves have experienced. That would be one example. Another example would be sexual assault. Excuse me if that's triggered for anyone. I won't go too much into it, but you could say, for example, or anyone might say, I was assaulted, and that person was prosecuted, that person was not prosecuted, that person was never found. But I would suggest that the writer would stop after I was assaulted XYZ, I would suggest against maybe going into detail of graphics in terms of that exact moment, not because it's not a valid experience or that nobody wants to hear your story. Absolutely, your story is valid, and there's many different ways that graphic can be graphic. But the reason is that the purpose of a personal statement essay is to get to know you. And telling about that story tells the reader more about that moment than about who you are as a person. And that can be really tricky because maybe that moment or any moment that's happened in a person's life that could be described as graphic, falling out of a 10-story building. Absolutely, there's a lot surrounding that exact moment in time that has maybe created a person. But saying I fell out of a 10-story building window and moving on in terms of what your life was like after that can be much more impactful and more effective for an admissions officer to get to know you and not get to know the story of how you fell out of a 10-story window. Just let me know if I answered your question. We have more questions in the chat.
Yeah, and I would love to kind of address Ruby's question about her, essay, which I love. Thank you for putting yourself out there, Ruby. And I love this, like, why you volunteer topic. The way, and I don't know how long your resume is. My resume, without any editing done, as a block of experiences that I've had and jobs that I've had, it's 4 pages long. You don't want to send a 4-page resume to admissions. It really should be no longer than 2, probably more on a 1-page situation. That means that you're cutting out a lot from your resume. Don't cut out whole jobs that you've had or whole volunteer experiences you've had, but like the details get cut out. And really that personal statement is a time for you to be able to go into detail, not about what you're doing, but like the impact you've had on other people and the impact that you've received. So even in that, like, why you volunteer for a certain group personal statement, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think your essay is going to be 2 pages about why. It'll probably be, about your community, who you are, why you volunteer, what you got out of it, what that makes you feel in the future. So for your future and your community. So with that gives a little bit more color to that volunteer experience, which might be 1 line in your resume, right? So, just because it's mentioned in your resume doesn't mean you can't write about it. It's you want to add more information about it. Hope that makes sense, Ruby.
Definitely. I know we had some questions that we had gotten in the Google Forms when we'd been mentioning this workshop in the general. Oh, great, Ruby. And one of them is how to still create that connection and how to what to do, how to move from waitlist. What are your actions when I'm waitlisted and I'm below median? Stats maybe is how I should say this. What do I do if I'm waitlisted and I'm below median stats?
In that waitlist letter, usually a school will give a link to where you can send a letter of continued interest. I've seen it with some of my friends, and a lot of times it's like, okay, yeah, I just need to write an email and send it there. And it's like, okay, let's take a little bit of a closer look about what needs to be included in that letter. Number 1, be very clear about the intent. Say, yes, I am interested. Don't be roundabout. It is the worst thing to be roundabout about the topic, right?
In casual language. Something is that Ayaka and I have both seen where maybe I say like, I'm interested in whatever my next steps in life are. Very vague, very casual. I'm interested in your program, in your school. So it's okay to be direct.
Yeah. The other thing is, I personally think it would be great to include another thing. It's almost like another writing prompt. And I don't think you need 6 months to think about it, because you don't have 6 months to think about the email that you're going to send of continued interest. But in the period between when you sent your application and when you've gotten this like waitlist letter, I'm sure there's been a couple months in between. Talk about what's happened. If you were a student when you were applying, and you've graduated, say, you've had an extra set of grades that have come out, or you've gotten an internship that you might not have started yet, but you're excited to do. If you're working a new project that you're working on, business moves fast, so you might be on a new team, new project. Talk about it. You don't need to go into like serious detail about what you're doing, but just kind of show that you're moving forward. And moving forward in your law school dreams as well. So kind of show that intent, show that you're still active and, being part of the community, all of that. It doesn't need to be super significant work. It could, just be in your job. Let's say, for example, I work in diversity and inclusion in my job, and we're launching a new project. I could, if I was on a wait list, I could talk about that and say, these are the new initiatives we're working on, and I want to bring that to the school. That's it. And be very succinct about it.
Amazing, Ayaka. So what I'm hearing from you is if I'm waitlisted and I'm below median stats, I can send that letter of continued interest. Be clear, say I'm very much so still interested, and maybe bring something new to the table that wasn't present in my application, something new I'm working on. If I have new grades, if I'm still in school, in undergraduate or in graduate school, new grades that have come in that are higher, I could say I have new additional materials, right here. Or if I'm out of school, which I know a lot of applicants are, talk about a current project we're working on. And still, if none of those options are available to me, I might say, mention I'm a continued letter of interest and say, I've been following that Professor XYZ made a statement to the New York Times and their thoughts on XYZ. I thought that was interesting because I'm interested in this program or this clinic specifically with them, and I'd like to contribute like this. So you can absolutely keep up with recent current events and still keep it brief, and try not to give them reading material, like check out this article, like they don't want that. But if you said, hey, I saw this, or I saw that one of your clinics is up to this, a lot of schools have a YouTube presence, and it's a lot of fun. So just go and watch mock trials. You could watch a lot of different things. Hopefully that answers the wait list question. We have another question in the chat, and we had another one in our Google form. Ayaka, how do I write an addendum?
Well, depends on what the addendum is about, but you want to keep it short, sweet, to the point. You don't want it to sound like you're making excuses for yourself. Don't drag it on. Get to the point and move on is really, I think, the way to go. I've seen a couple addendums who are like, it was a sunny morning and, I thought I had everything together, but X, Y, and Z happened. Like, I get that, these might be really hard things to talk about and you might want to like set the context and all of that. But really just say what happened. If it's a low LSAT score, just say, hey, I have a low LSAT score. I don't think it's representative of who I am. X, Y, and Z happened, move on. I don't think it really needs to go beyond that.
It really doesn't. And we've talked about this before, that admissions officers are not mad at you. They have nothing against you. They're reading everything that you present from an open slate. They're looking for people to say yes to. So you don't have to approach anything as though like you've been bad or you've done something bad, which links me into, there's a lot of questions in terms of taking time off. We have one earlier in the chat from Carolyn. We have Danielle, I'm going to get to your question. We have questions about taking time off. To everyone, we've just been through a global pandemic. Any sort of time off is okay, but I've heard this multiple times. You don't want to have time off where you're like, I had time off and I spent a lot of time watching television, and it was so relaxing. It was so great. It was like healthy for my mental health. If you have time off of school, I would suggest writing an addendum. If you genuinely needed rest, I would suggest that you speak about what did you gain from that? What did you learn from that? What was a perspective that you gained at the end of that restful period? If anybody has time off, say in this year where they like lost their job, there's been many gaps. I know, for example, I've even worked as a pizza delivery driver because I had a gap in my resume, and so it doesn't matter what you're doing, but if there's any sort of time off that will be apparent in a transcript or a resume, it's not bad, but maybe mention it, whether it's in the addendum to a resume where you say there was a gap here. This is how I spent my time. Did you volunteer? You don't have to volunteer. Did you, for example, you don't have to be a superhero. Like I volunteered and I organized this in my free time. This is a real example about myself. I had, when COVID-19 first had stay-at-home orders, I took a 2-week off period and I taught myself how to play soccer. I don't know how to play soccer still. I'm really bad at it, but that's what I did with my time. That would actually be sufficient because I'm trying to farther myself. I'm trying to learn something. I've gained perspective. I've humiliated myself. It goes on and on. So time off is fine, but time off doing nothing, not good. You want to have something, some sort of perspective that you've gained.
And if I may add, in answering Carolyn's question, I graduated college in 2015. And originally I was like, oh, I just want to go straight into JD. Now it's been 6 years since 2015. So I've taken a lot more time off than I was expecting. But I remember I talked to a professor that I'm very close with, and he was like, you know what, it's really good to go outside of the world of academia and get some perspective on how business works, how, you know, a working woman, an Asian woman is in the United States, you know, and kind of I was in Berkeley, so we were all about like social justice and, you know, Black Lives Matter was going on in Berkeley at that time. And so I was very much idealistic, and I was like, I'm never going to let a man talk down to me. Well, really, in the professional workspace, it happens more often in a micro way than, you know, I was expecting. And without knowing that, I don't think I would be as strong as a applicant that I am now. And not to say that you need to have traumatic experiences or, you know, bad experiences to be good, but to experience something outside of college is great. And I think taking a year, pushing it out so that your application is better is great as well. So Carolyn, I don't know if you're right graduating college right now, but, you know, I don't think 1 year is that big of a deal when you think about all the experiences that you can have in a year.
Absolutely not. Is it too late to apply and then I'm wrapping this up. This will be the last question we take of the evening. Email us at admissions@lsatunplug.com. Is it too late to apply for law school this year if you're taking the June LSAT Flex? Look at the school's website. There are some schools that take applications all the way until August. But I would say that scholarship money, opportunities, space, we've seen a rise in applications this year higher than it was last year across the board, across all law schools. It could be that if somebody doesn't get in, it could just be that they're just full. Maybe you could get in if you had applied earlier in the year. So look at their website, email their admissions, schools, they're all different. Okay. That was a lot. And I wish we could keep going. And please email us and Facebook message us. We're around and we want to hear from everyone.
Thanks for joining all.
Okay, bye everyone. Have a great Sunday.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.